What is going on, everybody? We're live. We made it. It's conference championship weekend. It's been a great season. It's been awesome. We're back. This is going to be the last, likely the last show we have this week because it's the last main slate. Bull season's a little bit crazy, of course. You do have some decent slates, but we break down the main slate each and every week, and this is the last main slate. We have 8 games on tap. There's 2 championship games on Friday. Obviously 10 conferences. So that means 8 are left for Saturday. So a little bit of a shorter slate, but definitely still plenty of options with 8 games. So as usual, we're going to go through each and every single one of these. As always, shows brought to you by Daily Bread Media. Hopped over to the channel this year, and I think it's been excellent. I've been really excited each and every show this year. I think we did some great things. I think we had some really great shows. Hopefully you guys benefit from the insights, try to give you some pretty good in-depth information on every game out there each and every week. So it's really been a pleasure. Just thank you to each and every single one of the listeners who's been showing up each week since this will be the last time we'll be on here. Other than that, big thank you to Kevin for coming on with me this year. It's been terrific, man. How was your Thanksgiving? How we doing? How we looking this week?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome. It's really been great. I think we've done some really good stuff, as you said. Put some really great information out there. I thank everybody for listening. I can't believe it's over. I can't believe this is the last one of 2022. I think it's an interesting slate. I think some of the games are pretty good. I'm just not sure fantasy wise how it's going to look, but we'll break it down and see what we come up with.
Yeah, definitely not my favorite fantasy slate, but it's our last one, so we're gonna make the most of it. Me and Kevin were talking like the running backs this week look excellent. Wide receivers, woof. Quarterback, we'll try to find some good quarterbacks, but it's not the greatest. There's at least some options. Wide receiver, I don't even know how many options we have, but we'll find them. The news this week, obviously, you got to play it a little differently, right, Kevin? Because part of what you do in DFS, especially in college, man, you can really pick on the teams that suck because there are some teams that are terrible. And you can get some guys that are like 20% owned, sometimes going against Arizona defenses when they should be 80 because teams like Arizona don't play defense. There's no Arizonas this week, okay? This is the conference championship. This is big boy on big boy football in each respective conference. And then Purdue. Just kidding. Shout out to Purdue. But yeah, change it up a little bit. So whatever strategy you have, you're going to have to tweak it just a little bit. Honestly, it feels a lot more like NFL DFS strategy, which isn't my favorite, but who cares? I'm not going to complain. It's our last week. It's going to be good. All right, let's get straight into it with the first one. We have Kansas State going up against TCU. TCU only a 2.5-point favorite. They are 9-2-1 against the spread this season. They've been fantastic. Over under this one is set at 61.5. I already see some 62s popping. There's a chance that one continues to climb. Of course, this is a rematch. These two teams played earlier in the year. Kansas State got out to a 28-10 lead. That was the game that Adrian Martinez first got injured. I think it was the first drive. He went out, did not return. Will Howard stepped up, had actually a very good game. They were able to grab that 28-10 lead, but they did not score after 8 minutes left in the second quarter. They didn't score again. TCU went on a big run, won 38-28. So here we get the rematch. Now Will Howard's the established starter. Adrian Martinez supposedly is he's questionable to return. Sounds like he might play. I don't think he's going to play a whole lot. The way they're talking, the way Kleiman mentioned, it sounds like this is Will Howard's job for sure. Martinez might be in there in a few packages. Sounds like about it. But this is a fantastic football game. First off, Kevin, you got any big leans on the side?
I think it's going to be obviously. I think it's going to be close as Vegas says. I just think TCU's probably. I'm hoping TCU wins because I really want to see TCU make it to the playoffs and keep Ohio State out. So that's where I'm at.
I don't even want to picture it. Like if they lose and get left out, I don't even want to picture it. Don't even want to talk about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Even though I usually root for Kansas State, had a bet on Kansas State in the first matchup, and all of a sudden they're on their third string quarterback. They were up 28-10. Somehow I lost that bet. So not exactly inclined to bet Kansas State in this spot. But every TCU game is close. I think this should be great. All right, without any further ado, TCU, they have a great defensive coordinator, but not exactly elite talent on the defensive side of the ball. They're 53rd in EPA per play, 105th in explosiveness, which is definitely a question mark. So, Kevin, where are we looking at Kansas State in this matchup?
Well, like Howard's a really good price. 63 is just a really good price. I played him last week. He burned me a little bit. That said, it's a really good matchup. He could easily account for 300 total yards and 3 total touchdowns and easily, reach really good value. So I don't mind that play at all. Obviously, at running back, Deuce is their man. He's their main cog on offense. He's always a great play, and he's never really too expensive. He's always around at 7,000, 7.2. So don't mind that either. Honestly, I think the guy I really like the most, especially for his price, is Knowles, the wide receiver at 5.4. So we talked about receivers being a tough slate for receivers. If I'm picking a couple receivers on a slate, Malik Knowles is one of them. He's been really good the last 2 weeks. And they're going to have to keep up with TCU, do their best to keep up with TCU. So I really like Knowles at that price. I think last week he scored 2 rushing touchdowns. So even though he didn't have a ton receiving, he does get those touches, out of the backfield at the receiver position. So I really like Knowles, and I think he'll be in a decent amount of my lineups, basically at his price and his potential.
Yeah, I don't hate that shout out at all. I think the first where it starts with Kansas State, obviously it starts with Deuce Vaughn should be priced at 8.5K every week. And for some reason he's just sitting there at 7.2, 7.4, 7.1. So just an egregious mispricing. So of course he's fine. He gets PPR work. He's great in cash. Very hard to get away from in cash. There's some really good running back options, but that's a fantastic price on Deuce Vaughn. Even if you don't want to play a second quarterback, I actually wouldn't hate if you put him in the super flex in tournaments just to get a little different. Other than that, they've been playing more at 12 personnel lately. They've had the breakout at tight end, Sano, who is only at 3.5K. He's been pretty darn good. They have 4 guys who have above 365 receiving yards, Sano being one. And then the 3 receivers that are on the field, pretty much an equal amount in Knowles, Brooks, and Cade Warner. I believe Cade Warner is EJ Warner's brother, Kurt Warner's son, I believe. Yeah, I remember he came out of the Arizona prep. He was a big time receiver there. He's really kind of come on. He has at least 5 targets in each of their previous 4 games, or he did before last week's blowout against Kansas, where they didn't really need him. So I think the price on Warner is really good. I don't hate the shout out on Knowles whatsoever. They used a few jet sweeps. They kind of made it a habit of noting in the press conferences they're going to have a few different wrinkles for TCU, not just going to line up and do the same thing. So that could be possible. When they do go 12 personnel, this guy Sammy Wheeler caught a wide open touchdown pass a week ago. I think I'd prefer Sano if I'm going there. And then, Will Howard, I think, is viable on a slate where there's, I think, maybe, 6, 7 quarterbacks that are viable and not really any that I totally love and some health questions. I always think you can go to Will Howard. The volume's not going to be there, right? He only attempted 21 passes last game, 27 in back-to-back games before that, but he runs a little bit, could get a rushing touchdown here, could be viable in tournaments. And he's been pretty steadily getting you about 20 fantasy points other than last week. So I don't hate it. All right, flipping it over here to TCU. This one's going to be played at AT&T Stadium, so definitely the travel there will help them out as technically the home team. Going against a tough Kansas State defense that ranks 28th in EPA per play, 32nd in rushing success rate, so not elite, but pretty solid. Kevin, obviously TCU loves to score points. They're 4th nationally in points per game. Everyone knows Max Duggan. Everyone knows Kendre Miller. Everyone knows Quentin Johnston, so tell me where you're looking.
Yeah, we know where the points are coming from here from the fantasy perspective. So Duggan's just a little too pricey for me. 8.1, I don't want to pay up for that. I think he had like 24 DraftKings points the last time they played, so he didn't do anything nuts. Quentin Johnson, guy's a stud on the field. He's the guy you want getting off the bus first, but he's still banged up. I think he just doesn't have those big plays, and I'm just not. His price is depressed a little bit, which is good, but I can't trust him. So I will definitely have some Kendre Miller at running back, though. He's a stud. We play him almost every week, and there's no reason that they don't feed him here. So again, at his price of 6, was he 6'6"?
Yeah.
6'5"?
6'6".
Yeah, 6'6". I mean, that's, again, he's always in the 6s, and he's a stud. And I'll definitely play a decent amount of Kendre.
Yeah, Max Duggan's tough for me this week. I think I'm going to end up with a fair amount of him. I just basically think if I'm ranking the quarterbacks, regardless of salary, just who I think projects for the most fantasy points, I think it's Max Duggan and John Reese Plumlee vying for the number 1 spot. And John Reese Plumlee has an injury concern that we will talk about. Didn't finish last week's game, whereas Duggan doesn't have that. Duggan does run more than he has shown lately. I know every game is a must-win game for them, but obviously holding nothing back here. I think he should benefit from the return of Quentin Johnston. They described him as 100% this week, okay. Kevin, good. And it totally good to hear, right? Yeah. But it's like Mike Williams when he played for the Chargers a couple weeks ago. They said he was 200%. Okay, and then like the very first pass he catches on the sideline, his ankle's hurt again. Here we have Quentin Johnston, a similarly bodied receiver who is suddenly 100% after not being so for a number of weeks. So I will believe it when I see it. I think the price is fantastic on Quentin Johnston. I'm not sure I'm going to be heavily owned on him because I haven't seen him healthy since the Oklahoma State game in week 7, maybe the Kansas State game, the first time they played. We haven't seen him healthy in a very long time. So at this point, I will see it when I believe it. But that's a fantastic price because he could be, if he's fully healthy, then he's the top wide receiver play on the slate at this price. So we're throwing him out there, but I'm highly questioning that. Kendra Miller, I saw the Kansas State linebackers. They were asked about what it's like to play against Kendra Miller, and they likened it to trying to tackle Derrick Henry. So that tells you all about Kendra Miller. Breakaway speed, tough to tackle. My issue is they don't really give him as big of a workload as you typically would see from a back who is as good as him in college. That being said, he gets fantastic goal line usage, and he's been an absolute monster, and this one has a total over 60. So it's pretty much wash, rinse, repeat. All right. Let's flip it over to the MAC Championship. We have Toledo. Favored by 3 going against Ohio, who's really had a good turnaround season here. Over under in this one is 54.5, so I'm not expected to be a ton of scoring. Toledo has a number of interesting options. We don't really know who their quarterback's going to be, Kevin. DeQuan Finn sounds like he's been dealing with an ankle injury for quite a while now. He was out, he came back, then he was out again, then he came back, then he played half a game, and then he was pulled from last week's game against Western Michigan after throwing a pick 6. He was terrible, man. 3.2 yards per attempt, 2 interceptions, lost a fumble, negative rushing yards. It was bad. So then they put in Tucker Gleason, and he only completed 34% of his passes. He's still putting up some fantasy points. So fantasy-friendly offense, decent matchup. Overall, we need to talk about Toledo on some really good pricing here. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, it'd be great if we knew who was playing at quarterback because both are a great price. Ohio's pass D is awful. I think it's the worst in the country. It's really, really bad. So obviously they should throw all over them. And their receivers, really good prices. I mean, Maddox is 5.4, Newton is 5 flat. What is it? Blankensee is 4.8. Turner's 4.2. So they spread it around a lot. So that's kind of the problem. You're not going to get a concentrated, heavy target on anyone. So it's really pick your guy you want and maybe throw a different guy in 3 different lineups. It's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, my normal thing on Toledo wide receivers, unless it's a action slate and I have to, is to just totally stay as far away as possible from Toledo wide receivers. They have a dual threat quarterback. They rotate guys in. There's almost never an alpha. Like even Winstead on ECU, it's like, where did he come from? Why is he so amazing this year? Grabbing all these targets at ECU. I'm grabbing way more targets than CJ Johnson, right? It's like, well, he came from Toledo where they don't utilize their wide receivers. So they don't utilize their wide receivers. They're going to have 5 names worth knowing here. 4 of them are going to rotate in out wide. Even Michael Barkley at 3.8K, he's been one of my favorite pay down options for a while now. Hasn't really done anything big. But now he's going to split time because Blankensee came back, and even Blankensee's been putting up some points, right? Has 220 burgers going back to earlier this year. I think overall, Jawan Newton, I think he'll probably he's been playing just about the most snaps, even though they've been pretty much on the same level since Blankensee came back. But Jawan Newton has really been the guy this year, leads them in targets, leads them in playing time. After a down week, after he had pretty much a double digit showing in every single game this year, I think Newton's definitely the top play for me on this team, and he's where I'm going to be looking. Maddox is also fine in cash, I believe, hasn't really shown as big of an upside. It's just that Newton is cheaper, so probably higher ownership is going to be on Newton. Their running back room has been an absolute mess. I won't be playing them even though they're cheap. Penny Boone is a huge Maryland transfer who could stumble into a touchdown or 2, but at this point he hasn't done it this year. I won't be waiting for him to do it in this matchup against a good Ohio team. Their defense isn't great, but they are good. And then quarterbacks, I mean, I think there's a good chance 2 of them play. Like I said, Finn hasn't been healthy in a month. It's kind of like with Quentin Johnston. At this point, if you haven't been healthy in a month, Could you suddenly get healthy and could you suddenly have a good game even if you're not healthy? Sure. But at this point, we haven't seen it. We have a decent sample size. It's not like these guys just got injured a week ago and we don't know what to think. We've seen them try to play through it. We've seen them visibly, clearly, statistically be hampered. Case in point. Okay. Other than that, we're going to flip it over to Ohio. Kevin, Curtis Rourke is out, but they do have CJ Harris at 5.5K at quarterback and some other, again, just guys who are priced way too cheap for no reason. They price Mac guys too cheap, and it doesn't really make any sense. So where are you looking here at Ohio?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's price per dollar. I think might be the best play on the slate. 5.5 for a quarterback that in a game that should be a shootout. He had 3 rushing touchdowns last week. He's not Rourke, but he's still seems pretty good, especially for that price. So I think Harris is a great price. As you said, they just mispriced the Mac guys. And I don't know, even at that price, I think he might carry a lower ownership percentage than you might think. So I think that's good. I think that's key, especially in tournaments. So I will have a lot of Harris. He makes it really easy to play anyone else you want. So I think he's a really good look. At running back, Bangura's he's been really good up until recently. So I don't think I'm going to play him just because I don't want to pay that price. Well, last week he was a little down, but he still had 27 carries, so he gets the carries. So I guess he's not a bad play. I don't know that I want to pay that price for him. I think I'd rather be in the 6s for the other guys. We're gonna, a couple guys we talked about already, and a couple guys we'll talk about later. And then at receiver, they kind of spread it around. Wilgus is their main guy. He's been their stud all year. Not bad, but again, he's pretty highly priced, and he didn't have a great game last week. I actually have a little bit of interest in Jacoby Jones. He's been pretty consistent the last 4 weeks, and at 5.5, not a bad option, especially if you're gonna stack with Harris at 5.5. So for 11K, you're getting a stack, which is not bad, and I think it could be a low-owned stack. So probably Harris and Jones are my interest here for Ohio.
Yeah, I think you said it well. Like when I first saw this slate, I just jammed Harris in all the lineups. I took a second look, and I mean, Toledo's defense just grades out as elite in the advanced numbers, 11th in EPA per play, 5th in success rate, 8th in rushing success rate against. I don't really know. CJ Harris completed less than 50% of his passes last week. That's not really what I love to see. I think he really downgrades the passing offense as a whole, just because Curtis Rourke was such just a prolific passer. That being said, I think this offense still has a lot of talent. I still really believe in Tim Albin being able to scheme up points. I think they probably will scheme up points. It's just a little bit more difficult to tell where it's going to come from now that CJ Harris siphons off rushing workload from Sai Bangura, right? So regardless, those are just some of the negatives. The fact of the matter is he's 5.5K as a guy who is a rush-first quarterback and had 3 rushing touchdowns last week in a very fantasy-friendly offense. So, yeah, Harris is obviously fine. Bangura, I agree with you. I mean, he's $100 off Deuce Vaughn. I prefer Deuce Vaughn, but Bangura's been getting elite rushing usage. And what I said about Harris siphoning off touches, Bangura still had 27 carries last week. I really wish they commit to get targeting him in the passing game more because they did have points earlier in the year, and now he has no catches in each of his last 2 games and only has 1 in his last 3 games. Looks like they've been putting in McCormick to siphon off some of those receptions. Even he only has 3 in the last 2 games. So just overall, that's not very appealing. I agree that Jones is a fantastic look here at 5.5K. He's my favorite play on the team. I was just watching that game last week, and like Harris really liked Jones more than Wiggles. I call him Sammy Wiggles, by the way. At 6.8K, I mean, this guy was way too cheap all year. Now he's 6.8K, only had 1 catch. Happened to be a touchdown last week, but that really has me looking at Jones. Overall, the volume's just kind of difficult to track in this offense. Miles Cross has been the guy at points, so maybe in tournaments. And even Bostic was the guy earlier in the year. So I think right now, if we can peg it as Sammy Wiggles and Jones as the 1A and 1B, with Jones being the 1B, I don't think that's a bad look whatsoever. All right, flipping the page to Coastal Carolina versus Troy. Let's check out our spread in this one. It is 8.5 currently with Troy, which is actually very interesting, Kevin, because it was 10.5 when I last saw it a day ago. Total is sitting at 48. Obviously, the big news here is on Coastal Carolina quarterback Grayson McCall. Saturday will be 4 weeks into his original 3 to 6 week timetable, out with injury. He's one of the best quarterbacks in America, regardless of the team you play for. I am not super confident on his availability, although that line move really has me second guessing. Chadwell said he's getting better each week, quote unquote. It's closer probably to a bowl game than it would be to this week. If he's saying it's closer to the bowl game than this week, that has me thinking McCall's not going to play. Now the line move, McCall's a tough dude. He's the guy who did the whole I pissed heel thing. So Grayson McCall's a bad motherfucker. Who knows if he's going out there or not? That being said, it totally changes how we view this offense. So Kevin, how are we viewing Coastal if he plays, and how are we viewing them if he does not play?
Well, if he plays, then I'm in on Pinckney and Brown at wide receiver, because they've been really good with him. Without him, they're basically non-existent. So it's really all hinges on McCall if he plays or not. So the line, that is a weird line move. So that may think he's going to play, but then you read you hear what you just said, and who knows? So I'll probably avoid, but if I do hear McCall's playing, then I'm definitely interested in Pinckney and Brown at wide receiver. They've been really good when he played, and like I said, when he doesn't, they can't throw the ball. So it really depends on McCall's status if I have any interest in the Chanticleers.
Yeah, I don't think I'm playing McCall either way. He's a great quarterback, but even when he was playing and the foot injury was hampering him, they would take him out to run the ball. They'd put Bryce Carpenter in to run the ball and not Grayson McCall. And that really hampers kind of what he does and what makes him interesting in fantasy. So if he doesn't play, it's going to be Guest, who has looked god-awful at quarterback, really can't lead this offense in a functioning manner, and then they're going to bring Carpenter. So you have two guys coming in. Overall, his availability really changes how you're going to view these backup options. If he does play, I think Jared Brown and a slate where we said we just really don't like the wide receivers. This guy was absolutely steady as can be, and had a huge ceiling going back earlier in the year. You can see there 27 points, 20 points, 15, 18, 29, 35. Just absolutely elite. And then he was dinged up, did come back last week, but they didn't have a quarterback that can throw the ball. So if Guest is playing, I want absolutely no interest. Pinckney, I agree, is a fine option. I view him as more of a cash play, and Brown is more of a tournament guy. Again, I don't expect McCall to play, though, so I'm not really going to be looking at either of these guys. And then the running back room, they give Reese White, CJ Beasley, and Braden Bennett all touches. I think Braden Bennett clearly has the most upside of these guys. He was absolutely fantastic to end the season last year. Was injured all year, surprisingly. I didn't see any news of it in the offseason. Maybe I missed it. And then he doesn't play until week 11 against Southern Miss, and they have really been slow phasing him back in. So you're going to have a three-way rotation in the backfield. Going to be hard to figure out where that comes from. Overall, I'm not looking at anything on Coastal Carolina, is my long way of saying this. Troy's defense is absolutely elite. There's a reason this is a 10-win team. Their only losses came to Ole Miss in a game that if I recall correctly, they were only outgained by 3 yards in that game. Okay, played a pretty damn good game, especially defensively. And then against App State in a game where they were winning and they lost on a Hail Mary. It was that crazy Hail Mary back from, what was that, week 3, week 4. So overall, I think this Troy team is better. I expect the Troy team to shut them down. They have a great defense. So, yes. All right, flipping it over to Troy. What are we thinking here on Troy? Some very cheap prices, not a very good offense.
Yeah, I really wish so Coastal Carolina is pretty good against the run. I really wish they were a little worse against the run, because I really like Vidal at 5.7, the running back for Troy. They've been feeding him the last 2 weeks. He had 33 carries last week for 208 yards and 4 scores. Previous week against La Monroe, he had 29 carries for 242 and 2. So he's dropped a 49 and a 40 the last 2 weeks in DraftKings. Just been a beast. Now, they were really good rushing matchups. Neither team, Arkansas State or La Monroe, can stop the run. Coastal Carolina is much better against the run. But I think at that price, at 57, he's still a really good price for that kind of volume he's getting. Troy can't throw the ball really well. Watson at quarterback isn't very good. So the interest I'll probably have is Vidal at running back.
Yeah, Vidal is one of the toughest calls on the slate for me. If he was like 6.7K where he should be, like, I would be much happier, because then I'd just make a decision to fade him. But it's going to be really, really hard to fade him at that price in any format, which means you probably get a leverage play if you don't. I mean, dude, Coastal Carolina was miserable last week. Like, especially if McCall doesn't play. They averaged 2.8 yards per play against James Madison last week. They just might be a lame duck in this spot if he doesn't play, which I know is crazy to say about a team that's 31-5 in their last 3 seasons, but they look terrible, man. James Madison last week, they were outgained 502 to 183. I guess you say, hey, they already had the conference championship locked up, but sure, I don't know. They just haven't looked good without McCall regardless. So, yeah, I think it's quite clearly Vidal's the top option. I might even talk myself into some Tez Johnson play. I just think he's, especially in cash, he just gets a lot of targets and is decent. And Coastal Carolina is absolutely putrid against the pass, 123rd in EPA per pass, 117th in passing success rate. The defense isn't good anywhere. They're 127th in EPA per play overall. That's 4th worst in the entire country. So overall, I would like some Troy. I think Gunnar Watson at quarterback, I mean, he's dirt cheap. They just haven't been throwing the ball at all. If they don't have to throw the ball, they won't. So obviously game script and a game, again, we're saying it's really hard to forecast without McCall is going to be pretty dependent. So watch on news. Other than that, I don't think I'm going to get down to Rajay Johnson. I know he had a huge game last week, but the volume just really isn't dependent. In a great matchup, could he have a huge blow up spot at 4.5K? Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to throw him in some tournaments, but not going to have a ton because it's very dicey. All right, let's flip it over to not really say I'm not going to have much to say about this game. It is what it is. It's LSU versus Georgia. LSU. Any interest, Kevin?
0. Just not. I think Georgia's going to maul them.
They should.
Yep.
I mean, LSU played Texas A&M last week. Again, it's like how much stock do we put into those games though? They lost to Texas A&M, and then Coastal got absolutely blown out by JMU. It's like, well, they already had the conference championship locked up, but I don't think either me or Kevin thinks LSU is like an elite team or anything. So.
No, I think Georgia's way better. It's not even apples and oranges, really.
All right, so Georgia, I know it's not a team we love in fantasy, but it is a short slate, and they've been getting some big games from Kenny McIntosh, Brock Bowers, very cheap price. What are we thinking?
It is so hard to play these guys. That said, McIntosh has been really good the past 2 weeks. Again, he's another guy. He's 6.5, so he's right there in the middle. He might not be a bad play in tournaments because he's going to be pretty low owned. I think with the other running back options, I don't think there'll be a lot of people on McIntosh, so I don't mind the play. I certainly don't mind it. I don't know if I'll have a ton. I'll probably have a little bit of exposure, but he's probably the only option. Every time I play Brock Bowers, I get it wrong. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think in the 5 or so running backs that look really good on the slate, I think I'd include Kenny McIntosh in that bunch, and I just think it's a great price point. He catches passes. The issue is, of course, he doesn't get an elite workload, but I mean, I think they're going to be able to run on LSU, man. LSU, decent up front, but they're 84th in Havoc. They don't really do a lot. They could be solid, but 84th in rushing success rate, 67th in EPA per rush. Georgia should be able to run the ball on him, and I'm not the biggest fan of some of their backup running backs. Like, I guess running backs, I mean one specifically, Kendall Milton. I just think he's looked like trash all year long. So in a conference championship game, if they need any extra juice out of McIntosh, they will. But I guess me and Kevin are kind of thinking this shouldn't be too difficult for Georgia. So I guess if you play him, you're hoping for LSU to keep it close. Other than that, on a slate where the wide receivers really aren't good, Brock Bowers is the cheapest he's ever been and has as much upside as any receiver on the slate. Yeah, I like me some Brock Bowers, but of course it's tournaments only because he could go out and get you 3 points because that's just how this Georgia team is. Other than that, their wide receivers don't matter to me. Sounds like A.D. Mitchell might play, so good for him. Okay, Fresno playing Boise State. This one should be pretty entertaining. I think it's on the Big Fox, so I'll be watching this one on one of the big screens on the 1 p.m. game. Definitely going to be paying more attention to this than the Georgia game, unless the Georgia game is close, of course. 3.5 in favor of Boise State is what I'm seeing, and the total is set at 54. Let's start with Fresno. Healthy Jay Kaner. They lost 40-20 in the first matchup with no Jay Kaner. That was when they were 1-4. Now Fresno State's rattled off 7 straight victories. Okay, to reach the conference championship game. Boise State started the season 2-2, fired their offensive coordinator after getting blown out by UTEP. And now here they are meeting in the conference championship game. I think that tells you just about as much about the Mountain West Conference as it does these two teams. Regardless, they're both hot. This is going to be a good game. What are we thinking of Fresno?
Yeah, I'd love to play Haener. Like you said, he's back healthy and he's looking good. I just don't really like the matchup. Boise is really good against the pass.
Excellent.
They give up 158 yards a game, and they've given up 10 touchdowns all year. They're just really, really good against the pass. So, Haener, I think, is more of a tournament play because he could go for 350 and 4, and they could also have 220 and 2. So it's a tough play for me at that price. I'm probably not going to have much. He has good receivers to throw to with Moreno. Cropper, he's been really good. Remigio's been really good too. So he's got some weapons. I just don't like the matchup. So really, it depends if you want to take that risk and think he exploits that Boise State secondary.
Yeah, Boise State secondary, dude. They're first in passing success rate in the country. Okay, first. I think the defense is legit. It's going to be 30 degrees. It's going to be on the blue turf. It's hard for me to talk myself into Fresno, guys. If these guys were like $1,000 cheaper, I'd say, hell yeah, I'm going to play him because this is a veteran, experienced team, probably the most talented team in the conference, okay, unless it's Boise, right? But offensively, probably the most talented team in the country. Like, this is Haener's last college game. Haener's an absolute warrior. If Haener was like 6.8, I'd lock and load him. 7.2, I'm going to have to make some interesting lineup decisions. Just my configurations are kind of using up a lot of salary right now. So I think Haener's okay. I might talk myself into him, but it's an extremely tough matchup, man. Like, if they find themselves in passing situations, which they probably will, Boise's also first in passing down success rate. So fourth in passing down EPA. So yikes. Jordan Mims, not for me. Tough matchup. I just think there's some elite running back options with better, more upside, more volume, higher floor. Yeah, it's not a Jordan Mims for me this week. I think Nico Remigio. I mean, we just saw Utah State put up, what was it, 469, 480, somewhere in that range yards against this team last week. And so Boise State's defense has been great, but Boise State is getting absolutely thrashed by injuries right now. They have, I think, 4 defensive linemen out. They have like 2 safeties out. They're getting hit pretty dang good, man. Even when they're starting wide receivers, their starting tight end is out. Fresno's getting healthy at the right time. Boise is not. So if anything, I'd play Fresno plus 3.5, even though Boise's been so good and is at home. Like, that has me thinking, or maybe Remigio does have a big game because he's gotten a takedown or 2 for me this year. He's been excellent. He's in the slot. We just saw Terrell Vaughn go for 8 catches, 118 and a tutty against Boise State in the slot. And Remigio's been very great. And Cropper always has explosive playability, but I think it's hard to pay for Cropper on the slate. All right, let's flip it over to Boise State. Taylon Green, decent price. Halani, very expensive price, but he's been excellent. And then a whole bunch of yuck for the most part. What are we thinking here, Kevin?
I think my only interest is Green, obviously, at quarterback. He's been pretty good this year, and now he had a 91-yard touchdown run last week, which obviously inflated his stats a bit. So he probably won't have that, but he's still been pretty good, and he's a decent runner. So for that price, I think he makes a real good option. And like you said, it's going to be cold there. It's going to be at home on the blue turf. I don't see why he doesn't have a decent game and make for a good option in championship week for sure.
Yeah, hard to get off of. He's Mountain West Freshman Player of the Year. He's been playing great. He's big, and he runs a lot. I will say, well, first off, nobody owned him at all last week, and he threw for 4 touchdowns out of nowhere. Yeah. But that 91 yards rushing, okay, he had a 90. First off, that whole game in general, that Utah State game, I had a bet on Utah State, so I can rant about it. Plus 16.5. It's 28-23. It's a 5-point game. Utah State is driving to win the game with under 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Cooper Legas throws a pick. I think it's next play, Taylon Green runs for a 91-yard touchdown. So that's where the 91 yards come from, okay? Garbage time. Well, garbage time. At that point, they had the ball. They were going to win. And then Legas comes back, throws a pick 6. Somehow Boise State covers, miraculously. Yeah, that's my rant on Taylon Green. But it's a great price. I don't hate Taylon Green whatsoever. George Halani, I could see him picking up ownership just because he's been so steady. He's the focal point of this offense. I think the best unit on the field in this matchup, I think, is probably Boise State's offensive line. They're 18th in stuff rate. I could see them pushing around a Fresno team that they give up over 300 rushing yards the first time these two teams played. Other than that, the receiving options. So yeah, Stephon Cobbs missed last week. That led to a big game from Latrell Caples. I don't really think you can count on that week after week. I think Fresno State's secondary guys are pretty decent. Watched them extendedly when they played USC to see how they would fare. And I thought they were fine. All right, UCF versus Tulane. The real battle for American supremacy. This one's an interesting rematch because UCF won the first game 38-31. This time around, Tulane is favored by 4, 3.5. There's some 4s popping. Over under this one's set at 57. So this is kind of an in-between game here. UCF, yeah, Plumlee's injured. He's been playing through the injury. He was pulled out of last week's game. It was Mikey Keene who had to keep this offense scoring to beat USF, which is a little bit scary. But UCF, man, they've been running wild in the American. Ran wild over Tulane in the first matchup. So tell me all about it. What are we thinking about the injury? Are we still playing him? Where are we looking at the other guys?
Yeah, I don't know about the injury. I mean, if he's good and plays the whole game, he ran for 176 in 2 last game on Tulane, so he should have a monster. Obviously Plumlee's a great runner and not a great passer. So if he's going to play the whole game, as you said, he makes a great option. He's probably one of the pay up options on the slate at quarterback. It just depends, how risk averse you are, whether you think he's going to play the whole game or not. Running back wise, they've been splitting with Harvey and Bowser. It's kind of a 50-50 split. So I don't really have any interest there, especially with Plumlee taking some rushing touchdowns and taking the opportunities. Wide receivers, Baker, O'Keefe, Hudson, they all get a decent amount of targets. So I really don't have much interest there. So for me on the UCF side, it's whether I'm taking the plunge on Plumlee or not.
I think he's the most important decision on the slate for me. I think he projects as my favorite quarterback play if he was healthy. I don't think it's even close.
Yeah.
He has the highest rushing upside of any quarterback in the country. It's that simple on a slate where there's no great quarterback guys, and we're trying to talk ourselves into Jake Haener against the number 1 rated secondary in the entire universe in 30-degree weather on the blue turf. You have Plumlee just sitting there being such an obvious option if he's healthy. I'm going to give you my reading of it, Kevin, and I'm not even totally convinced because he got pulled from last week's game. He was 9 of 9 passing with the touchdown. Only ran the ball 8 times. Had 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. Even though that game was close, they're playing USF. You can score the ball.
Yeah.
You and I can score the ball anytime you get the ball against USF's defense, okay? I think they're just resting him up for the championship game. Listening to the quotes afterwards, Malzahn said JRP was dealing with the hamstring injury that he's been dealing with for a few weeks now. So this isn't anything new. If he's been dealing with it for a few weeks, I mean, that means he's been dealing with it when he's putting up 35 fantasy points, 41 fantasy points. You get me. 41 fantasy points against this Tulane team. He also said if he plays, he's going to be ready to run.
Yep.
I like that quote. So I think I'm going to be all over JRP, but it really scares me, Kevin, because if I play him, he's just going to come out second drive of the game. You just know it. And that could be gamesmanship. You have a lot of coach speak, but I thought that was a pretty strong quote. And the fact that it definitely has been a few weeks and he's been playing anyway and it's still been running on it. I think he's fantastic. I didn't even talk about the other guys. I got so excited. I just almost skipped over. Ryan O'Keefe has been underrated forever in fantasy. He's finding cash. I wish his price was a little cheaper, obviously, but he's been by far their most consistent wide receiver, and he has home run ability. Tulane, of course, is 8th in passing explosiveness, 12th in explosiveness overall. They've done a really good job of limiting big plays. JRP got them for quite a few in the first time they met, however. That's because UCF's an elite talent. They're the most talented team in the American, so sometimes they pop big plays on you when these other teams like Memphis and whatnot cannot. Other than that, the running back room, I mean, yeah, you hit on it pretty good. I mean, Bowser's the touchdown guy, but he's just not effective whatsoever anymore. And it isn't a great matchup. RJ Harvey's been terrific. I think you can plug and play RJ Harvey if you want to, if you need to pay down. I just think the running backs are so much better elsewhere. Other than that, I'm not really looking at the secondary wide receivers. Like Javon Baker is super popular in some circles. I can't really figure out why, if they're like people holding priors on him or it's because he's an Alabama transfer. He's a talented guy, but he hasn't even really been fully healthy. I really prefer O'Keefe, who's only $600 more. And then Kobe Hudson's an Auburn transfer who's been just as good as any of these guys. And he's shown he can pop off for 26 fantasy points kind of randomly. Again, it seems like a back and forth game. This should be a really good game. All right. Other than that, it's Tulane. Yucky for fantasy, except for their running back. Kevin, tell me about them.
Yep. It's all about Tajay. I'm done playing Pratt, done with that experiment. We don't play Tulane receivers, and Tajay he's a beast. They're finally giving him the carries he should get. He scores touchdowns. He breaks long runs. The dude is just really good. And he's in that 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" range. He doesn't leave that range. So for me, in a game that obviously he's going to get a lot of carries, a lot of action, I'm going to have a lot of Tyjae Spears. He's one of the running backs that I think you need to have a lot of this week.
I made my first initial lineup. My first initial lineup did not have Tyjae Spears in that lineup. I went back. I went through it, and I said, what on God's green earth am I doing? It's so hard to get away from Tyjae Spears. He is excellent. He's been dinged up is the thing. He's been doing this on such elite efficiency because he's been dinged up. In that first UCF game, he had 8 carries, only 1 reception, still had 18 fantasy points, 130 yards. Didn't have a touchdown. It's incredible. He was dinged up in that game. He came out early, came back against SMU, wasn't even full strength, only had 13 carries, still had 34 fantasy points, only 13 carries. He was quite clearly healthy last week against Cincinnati. They said, we need this win against Cincinnati. Tyjae Spears is by far our best offensive player. He's getting the damn ball as much as he can handle. And it was great to watch. Like, you could tell right away, like the first few series, this guy already had like 11, 12 carries. It was great to watch. Tyjae Spears, you are a great college football player. I love you. Okay. I think I'm going to be playing you in my lineups most likely. It's not a super difficult matchup. UCF, they don't really stand out as a lead in anything. 110th in rushing explosiveness. So you could give up a few big runs to Tyjae. 66th in EPA per rush. Yeah. I like Tyjae. I don't like their passing options. Michael Pratt runs a little bit, and some people think that he's like an NFL quarterback because some people think he's cute or something. I won't go down that path. But anyway, Shea Wyatt is their top wide receiver most likely, but that doesn't really mean much in a 2-lane offense. I actually think the one I'd prefer to play in tournaments is Deuce Watts at 4.9. I just like Deuce Watts. I think he's their top red zone guy, and we see that because he has touchdowns in, what is that, 5 of his last 6 games, 6 of his last 7 games. He's quite clearly their red zone option. I don't really know what happened to Tyreek James at tight end. I thought he was going to be a very productive tight end this season, and it seems like he is totally in the doghouse, but he's a talented player, 5 touchdowns this year. If you really need a pay down option in a competitive game, I do not hate that. All right, turning it over. 2 games left. I can't believe it, Kevin. We have 2 games left in the whole season. Yeah. So let's make them good ones. Clemson playing North Carolina. Okay, North Carolina defense. I'm glad we have one. I lied. I said there was no Arizona defenses on this slate. There is. There's a North Carolina defense. There is. Clemson's 7.5 point favorite, of course, after that strong showing against South Carolina. All right. Over-unders at 63.5 for this one. This is the best matchup on the slate. So, Kevin, I know it's ugly, but Clemson's talented and they have a great matchup. So where are we looking?
Yeah. If you have the stomach for it, you could certainly play DJ. I don't know if I have the stomach for it just because he stinks. But it's a terrific matchup. So really it depends on how crazy you want to go there. I think clearly the best play on the Clemson side is Will Shipley. Dude is just really good. When they give him the ball, he does really good things. So you would think against a North Carolina team that doesn't stop anybody very well, that Shipley's going to get 20 carries. He gets 20 carries. He's going to have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So for me, Shipley's the best option on the Clemson side. Wide receiver wise, they spread it out way too much. Williams, the freshman, is probably their best guy at 5.7, but he doesn't do a lot. He'll catch 6 or 7 passes, but he doesn't get many yards. He doesn't score any touchdowns. So for me, it's not worth playing any Clemson receivers. I think Shipley is the best option, and I think he's, along with Spears, another guy we'll talk about in the next game, and Kendre Miller. Those are my top 4 running backs of the week. So that's my spiel.
Yeah, Kevin, I told you off air. Shocked you, so now I'll shock the audience. I think I'm going to play some DJU this week. I haven't played him all season. And the whole season I've acknowledged he's big. He runs. They're going to score some points because it's Clemson. Even if they are incompetent, they're still Clemson. They're going to score. And I haven't given a shit. I haven't played him. Even sometimes it's burned me. Most of the time it hasn't. I don't care. This is a great matchup. There are no bad defenses on the slate. Well, might be hyperbole, but I've been over it. NC's defense is terrible. They are absolutely terrible. And I feel like everyone's going to be off. I'm not saying his last name, DJ Ukes. He had 29 pass attempts last week, only completed 8 of them, 27% of his passes. That's worse than the Toledo shit I was putting up there earlier. And that was a game they needed to win, and they just couldn't get a single ounce of competence from this guy. It's bad, but at this point, they're going to ride with him. I was on Will Shipley last week. My big thing with Will Shipley last week, I was debating between him and McIntosh, and it was like the biggest decision I had to make. They were $100 off. They ended up getting almost the exact same fantasy points. I think McIntosh got one more fantasy point, 25-26. I think, of course, he's fantastic. The issue is, of course, there's some other great running backs. I don't think Shipley's a must play. I just wish they would give him more carries. At this point, they seem absolutely content to give Phil Maffa a handful of carries. They seem content to give DJU 15 carries. So if I know they're giving DJU 15 carries, and I don't know whether they're giving Will Shipley 20 carries, in my opinion, that almost kind of makes DJU the top play on this team, even though he's nowhere near the most talented player on the offense. It's quite clearly Will Shipley. But even asked after the game, they asked Dabo, like, do you need to get Will Shipley more touches? I mean, hello, 132 yards, 8.8 yards per carry, a touchdown. Could have even had more. He broke a few long runs. He stumbled on a long one that should have been a long touchdown run. And his answer, Kevin, on whether Will Shipley should have got more touches, an easy one. The answer is yes, of course. We're not idiots here. We'll figure it out. His answer was we have 4 quarterbacks. We feel like we have 4 running backs on this team with DJ being one of them. And they're all going to get touches. It's hard to divvy around the touches that much. So
listen, it's the same thing he did he's the same thing he did with ATN for all those years and pissed me off for all those years. ATN was just a stud, and he refused to give him 20 carries a game.
Yeah.
So
it pisses me off. All that being said, I think these guys are all fine. North Carolina is dog shit. I won't even get into their numbers. Just another dog shit. Williams is, I agree, he's the top play. It's going to be hard to play him because he has blow-up potential. He also has 6-point potential. Other than that, Bernie, it's tough because I want to play one of their tight ends as a cheap guy, but they rotate Burning Stool at 4.5K and then Allen at 3.7K. I guess I'd just take the cheaper guy. If anything, he's had 3 productive games in his last 5, but he's also completely disappeared. That's actually 3 in his last 6 because he didn't even show up in the box score on one of them. But yeah, that's what I'm looking at. They're all great plays. All right, North Carolina. Drake May was the second coming of Jesus. He still might be, but he's really hit a rough patch over these last 2 games. They lost to Georgia Tech, and then they lost to NC State, and it has been ugly. Now a tough matchup here against Clemson. Probably the most talented quarterback on the slate by a wide margin, but also a tough matchup. So what are we thinking here for May and his cronies?
Yeah, I love Drake May. Had him on my season long, love him. But he, like you said, he's really been struggling of late. I don't know if he hit the freshman wall or just tough matchups, but matchup against Clemson is not great because even though Clemson hasn't looked great recently, they still have really good players on the defensive side of the ball. So at his price, I won't be playing May. Honestly, I don't know that I'll be playing any North Carolina guys, even though it's, there should be some points scored in this game. I don't know that I'm going to play any North Carolina guys. I don't like Downs at that price. It's just too high. I don't want to play the running backs. I don't want Green at running back. So I'm probably going to fade North Carolina and just hope it doesn't burn me. Hope May doesn't go for 40. I don't think he will, but obviously he could. Certainly has potential. He's shown potential for 400 yards and 5 or 6 total touchdowns. So we'll see. I think I'm going to take that risk and not play him.
Yeah, I don't think I'm playing any of these guys. I don't even know who the most appealing option is, to be honest with you. I guess May. Because there's not a lot of quarterbacks and he's cheaper than he probably should be for a guy who averages 34 fantasy points. But I don't want to play Drake May. They've hit a rough patch. The thing with this North Carolina offense, it's it's very RPO based. I noticed it when they played Notre Dame a few years back, and I studied it in depth, right? It's not quite Wake Forest, but it's similar. It's slow developing. It's very RPO based. If you can just shut down the run and you can win up front defensively, like Notre Dame always seemed to find a way to do, and like Notre Dame did hand UNC their first loss this year. And Notre Dame's front seven's not very good, man. The USC just ran all over them. Anyway, I think Clemson's going to be able to do that. And I don't think UNC is going to be as effective as they can. Of course, if they're playing from behind, as we project, that could lead to a lot of passing attempts for Drake May. That could lead to some scramble touchdowns for Drake May. So I won't totally talk you off of him. Josh Downs is clearly his top option. He's been hobbled the last 2 weeks and has had his 2 worst performances of the entire season. That's probably not a coincidence. On a slate without elite receivers, I think you can get there. Bryson Nesbitt is a really good tight end. I think they should use more. They've kind of been using him a more lately, but the volume really isn't there whatsoever. Elijah Green, the starting running back, has a very difficult matchup, and we probably can't project him to get quite as many carries as he has been lately. All that being said, he had a tough matchup against NC State last week and still managed 20 fantasy points, so decent price on him. All right, flipping it over. Last game, we have Purdue going against Michigan. Yeah, Purdue somehow is in the Big Ten championship game. This is probably on the flyer advertising for all conferences to get rid of divisions. Purdue, 17-point underdog. Totals at 51.5, up to 52 in some spots. Kevin, Purdue's really cheap, except for Charlie Jones. What are we thinking here for Purdue?
Yeah, O'Connell's the same price he always is, $6,000, whatever. That's where he lives, and he's been good in some games, some bad in some games, and I think this is one of the bad ones. I don't want to play him against Michigan. Michigan's D is really good. Obviously, you can think of possibly a small letdown after their big win of Ohio State, but it's still the Big Ten title game, so there can't be a letdown because they need to get into the playoffs. So I can't play O'Connell. I can't play Mockenby at running back. And I certainly can't pay 7-4 for Charlie Jones. So I can't play the Purdue guys. Durham. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Durham possibly, but that's about it. It's really hard to play the other guys.
I think Durham's the best price.
Yeah.
I know I was on O'Connell heavily last week in the afternoon slate. I'm going to research this. Braun was giving quotes afterwards about O'Connell just dealt with a death in the family. I believe it was his brother, and they weren't even sure if he was going to play. Okay. Purdue's just happy to be there, to be honest with you. I feel like, and I agree, I've heard the whole letdown thing a lot, and it's hard not to notice that with Michigan the week after playing Ohio State and looking forward to the playoffs. I just feel like, Kevin, people have been making excuses about Michigan and reasons not to jump on Michigan for 2 years.
Yeah.
Michigan's really good at football. They've been beating
Really
the absolute shit out of these teams. I feel like I heard last year when they played Iowa in the championship, like, oh, yeah, I don't know, it could be sleepy. Iowa plays good defense, right? And the same thing as I'm hearing Purdue. I think that Purdue team, I think this Purdue team's not as good as the Iowa team. So, and I think this Michigan team, I think this offense is probably better than last year. So, at this point, I'm just assuming Michigan's going to beat the shit out of all these Big Ten teams. Charlie Jones, Chuck Sizzle, of course you could play him. It's hard to get salary for me this week. I'd rather pay up for the running backs. But obviously, if you can make it work, that's cool. And of course, there's some decent like night and afternoon slates where there's no one to pay up for other than him and Josh Downs. So those will be interesting to try to build a lineup for. All right, Michigan, Blake Corum is out. That is obviously huge news on the slate. J.J. McCarthy had a blow-up spot along with a few of their receivers last week against Ohio State. Raise your hand if you saw that one coming. Last team of the year, Kevin, Michigan. Make it a good one.
Yeah, JJ, he's got all the talent in the world. Had a blow-up game, like you said, last week. He's a really good runner. They just don't run him as much as we would like from a fantasy perspective. But, I don't think he's a bad price at all, especially with Corum out. I think he's gonna have to make some more plays in this game, so don't mind him. He is tough to play because when you play him, you get him wrong. But I think I can play him this week. I think the biggest takeaway is without Corum, Donnie Edwards should get a ton of work, and he's 6.4. I think with him and Tajay are probably my two favorite running back plays on the slate. Michigan, what do? They run the football. They're going to run the football. It's what they do. So I know at wide receiver, Johnson blew up last week. He's been there for 10 years. He's not going to do that again. I think that was the game of his lifetime. So Ronnie Bell is their target guy. That said, don't generally play Michigan wide receivers. So for me, I think it's play McCarthy if you want a quarterback. And I think you load up on Donnie Edwards.
Yeah, pretty well said. The Donovan Edwards thing. Okay. The Michigan's running back should be 8.5K, 9K, probably over 9K. Like Blake Corum's been ridiculously cheap all season long. You have a Michigan starting running back at 6.4K. Come on. Purdue's defense has been pretty good, 24th in EPA. You're going to hear a lot about how good their rush defense is. heading into this matchup. Their rush defense is okay, man. Their defensive line ranks 98th in stuff rate. That tells me the defensive line is not nasty enough to deal with this Michigan offensive line. Donovan Edwards is playing with one hand. I am a little concerned because they had one of the Michigan writers said, well, they could just play him for one half and then just walk over Purdue in the second half. And it's like, it's not a bad point, but you do have some time to rest up for the college football playoffs. So I don't really think they do that because Michigan just really hasn't been doing that lately. At this point, it seems like they're just going to absolutely feed Donovan Edwards carries in this matchup. I don't really see how they don't. I think he is an amazing play. I wish his hand was a little bit better because he is a great receiver, and I'm not sure they're going to use him there as much as they used to. But I think the huge increase in rushing work should offset that. I'm not going to end the season by discussing Michigan wide receivers in depth. I think Ronnie Bell is their best one. I agree. Outlier performance from Mr. Cornelius. I do think the tight ends are interesting in the fact that they're very cheap. So Schoonmaker was injured, came back last week. He only played 10 snaps against Ohio State, whereas Loveland and the fan base loves Loveland.
The freshman, he's a stud. He's stud. He's really good.
They love him. He looks great. He has at least 40 yards in 3 straight games. Had a long touchdown against Ohio State. Played 25 snaps last week to lead the tight end room. So that's a cheap price, I guess, if you need a cheap wide receiver. All right, Kevin, we have made it to the finish line. What are you thinking overall on the slate? It's our last chance for a main slate. Do you have any absolute gems? Do we need to play 4 running backs? How do we deal with this?
I think you could certainly play 4 running backs on this slate. Like we said, the receiver or the quarterbacks are not great, so you could roll out a Plumlee lineup with 4 running backs and pay down at wide receiver and have a really nice lineup. So I think this slate comes down to picking a couple receivers that actually do something, because there's such a high variance with these receivers. It's going to be a crapshoot, really. So to me, that's the hardest part of this slate. Is picking that. There's going to be a 5K receiver that has a really big game, and who that is, that's where the crapshoot comes in. So.
Yeah, I think probably, I know like on a smaller slate, sometimes there's just less lineups because you have it figured out. I actually think that's not the case at all in this one. I totally agree. I think you have to take the shots on those wide receivers because it is not abundantly clear whatsoever. It rarely is with wide receivers. So in college, sometimes you can just counteract that by chasing the matchups and the guys who get an insane amount of targets because they're always underpriced. But on this one, I think it is really hard to do. You're going to have to take some shots in that mid-range and make a few more lineups than you. Shut up, Siri. Than you otherwise might. Other than that, what did she Google? Underpricing. There we go, baby. There we go. IPOs. We're talking IPOs. We're about to be talking IPAs in a second because it is 1 minute until 5 o'clock here on the West Coast. There's some Thursday night football. So good games on Friday as well, too. Go ahead and handicap. All right, Kevin. It was great doing the show with you each and every single week. Thank you so much for hopping on. Any final words for the people before we sign off for good this season?
I hope you guys really enjoyed the show. I think we put some really good content out there. Hope it helped you build some winning lineups. And, I hope everyone has a great week, great holiday season, great bowl season, and look forward to seeing you guys next year and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Daily Bread Media, College Football DFS. We are out. Until next season, we out. See you guys.